When my son told me to go find somewhere else to grow old and die, that I was useless now, I zipped up my suitcase like the obedient mother I'd spent my whole life being. 3 days later, I was sitting in a lawyer's leather chair, hands folded in my lap, listening to a stranger explain that my supposedly devoted husband had been playing a very long, very clever game. And my son? My precious only boy and his polished wife. They were about to learn that pawns sometimes learn how to play chess too. If you're watching this, make sure you're subscribed and tell me in the comments where you're listening from, because I'm about to tell you how I went from a homeless widow in a budget motel to a woman sitting at the head of the table, holding every single card. My name is Linda Carver. I'm 67 years old, and this is my story. 2 months before that lawyer's office, I was just Linda, wife of 42 years to a man named Walter, and mother to one breathtakingly ungrateful son named Daniel. When Walter dropped from a heart attack at 70, it felt like my whole world fell with him. 1 minute, he was in his recliner watching the news. The next, I was on the phone with paramedics, staring at the coffee cup he'd never drink. Daniel arrived at the house with his wife, Kelsey, less than an hour after the coroner left. Kelsey swept in first, perfume and sympathy and soft hands on my shoulders. "Oh, Linda, this must be so unbearable," she cooed, rubbing my arm like she was comforting an elderly neighbor, not the woman who had helped raise her kids. My son stood behind her, tie loosened, eyes glistening just enough to look appropriate. Daniel had always been Walter's pride and joy, the golden boy, the one who understood business, the one who made it out of our blue-collar neighborhood and into some fancy investment firm downtown. Me? I was the woman who cooked, cleaned, and quietly stretched every paycheck to make sure the lights never went off. I kept the house running so Walter and Daniel could feel like kings in their own little castle. After the funeral, Daniel and Kelsey started coming over more, always together, always with folders and brochures. We'd sit at the dining table Walter built with his own hands, and they'd spread out glossy pamphlets. "Mom, look at this place," Daniel said one evening, tapping a picture of a modern retirement complex with smiling, gray-haired models. "They've got activities, on-site medical staff, a shuttle. You'd never have to worry about driving again. And no stairs," Kelsey added. "This house is just a lot, Linda. Emotionally, physically, all those memories, it can't be healthy." What they meant was, you're in the way now. Every family dinner turned into a campaign. Just think about it, Mom. You'd have friends your own age. You wouldn't be so alone. I should have seen it. The flicker of calculation in Kelsey's eyes whenever money came up. The way Daniel said the house instead of your house. The final blow came on a Tuesday afternoon. It had been 6 weeks since Walter died. I still couldn't bring myself to sleep in our bedroom, so I'd moved into the guest room and left Walter's side of the closet untouched. The door opened without knocking, Daniel's key turning like he owned the place. Kelsey followed him in, dragging 2 large suitcases behind her. "Mom," Daniel said, voice clipped in that efficient way he used with clients, "we've made a decision." That word. We. Kelsey's smile was bright and brittle. "Daniel got the promotion, Linda. We need to move into the city quickly. This house is perfect for us and the kids. Close to schools, big backyard, all that." I stared at them, not quite understanding. "Move in? What are you talking about? This is my home." Kelsey's expression shifted, just for a heartbeat. The sweetness faded and something colder looked out at me. "Actually," she said, smoothing the sleeve of her blazer, "according to Walter's will, everything passed to Daniel. The house, the investment accounts, all of it. We've just been letting you stay here because we didn't want to overwhelm you while you were grieving." I felt the floor tilt. "Everything?" I whispered. "No, that can't be right. Walter showed me his will years ago. Mom." Daniel's voice sharpened. "I've seen the documents. I've talked to Dad's attorney. It's already done. He left it all to me because he knew I'd manage it properly. You never liked dealing with money. It's safer this way. Just the wife. That's what I heard, even though he didn't say the words out loud. I opened my mouth to argue, but Kelsey pressed on. "We've let you stay here out of kindness," she said lightly, "but we need to move in by the end of the week. It's time for you to find somewhere more appropriate. There's a senior complex on Maple Street that's very affordable." Then Daniel delivered the line that would haunt me later. "Mom, you need to go find somewhere else to live out your days. You can't just sit here taking up space. You're not useful anymore." Find somewhere else to die. That's what he meant. I packed in a fog. 42 years of marriage stuffed into 2 suitcases and a small box of photographs. Kelsey leaned in the doorway, checking her phone like she was waiting on a lunch reservation. "We'll send some money once we sort through everything," she said. "In the meantime, this should help you get settled." She pressed $200 into my hand like I was a stranger on the street. Daniel loaded my luggage into the back of their SUV. "Think of it as freedom, Mom," he said. "No more taxes, no more repairs. You'll thank us one day." As they drove me to the cheapest motel off the highway, I watched the only home I'd ever really known shrink in the rearview mirror. The brick steps Walter had fixed every spring. The maple tree Daniel climbed as a boy. The window I'd stood in front of to wave him off to prom. Now it was Daniel and Kelsey's house. I was just a guest they'd finally checked out. The motel they dropped me at was called the Sunset Motor Lodge, which was funny because there was nothing romantic or scenic about it. Thin towels, thinner walls, a sagging bedspread that smelled like old cigarettes and cleaning fluid. Kelsey set my suitcase down with a thump. "This should cover you for a few days," she said, patting my hand. "We'll be in touch once the accounts are organized." She was inheriting, according to her, everything, and handed me just enough cash to keep me from sleeping on a bench. When they left, their taillights disappearing into traffic, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the faded floral wallpaper. In less than 4 hours, I'd gone from grieving widow in a house full of memories to a homeless, 67-year-old woman in a roadside motel that rented rooms by the week. I cried for maybe 5 minutes, big hiccuping sobs that tore through me until they were done. Then, nothing? No more tears. Instead, a question, a quiet, steady one. What if they were lying? Walter had been a lot of things. Stubborn, old-fashioned, a little patronizing whenever money came up, like I couldn't understand numbers above grocery totals. But cruel? No. He had shown me a will once, years ago at the kitchen table. He'd walked me through it carefully, wanted to be sure I knew where everything was, how it would work if anything ever happened. And I was certain, down to the way his signature looked on the last page, that it hadn't said what Daniel claimed. The next morning, I took the crumpled bus schedule from the motel lobby and used their shaky Wi-Fi to look up Walter's old attorney. I remembered his name, Harold Green. He'd done our closing when we bought the house, handled our refinance, quiet, precise, always in a gray suit. His office was downtown, a 20-minute bus ride and $3 I could barely spare. But sometimes, at 70, you learn a hard truth. You can't afford not to ask questions. Harold's receptionist looked surprised when I walked in. "Mrs. Carver? Oh my goodness, Mr. Green's been trying to reach you since the funeral. Your daughter-in-law kept saying you were traveling. That's what Kelsey had told them. I was ushered into Harold's office. He stood as I entered, older now, but with the same steady eyes behind his glasses. "Linda," he said gently, "I was starting to worry. Please sit." He waited for me to settle before he spoke again. "I'm so sorry about Walter. He was a complicated man, but he cared deeply about you. I'm glad you're finally here so we can go over your inheritance." The word snagged. "My what?" "Daniel told me Walter left everything to him. The house, the accounts. He said you read the will already." Harold's brows shot up. "Daniel said that?" "Yes, they moved into the house. They drove me to a motel and gave me $200. I watched the color drain from Harold's face. He turned to his file cabinet, pulled out a thick folder with Walter's name neatly typed on the tab, and slid a set of documents onto the desk. "Your husband updated his will 6 months before he passed," he said. "He was very clear about his intentions. I read this will aloud at the formal reading, which you were supposed to attend." "Formal reading?" "Daniel told me you were too distraught to come," Harold said slowly. "He insisted he'd explain everything and deliver your copy. Linda, there is no version of this will where you receive nothing." He adjusted his glasses and began to read. "I, Walter James Carver, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife, Linda May Carver, our primary residence at 418 Willow Lane, including all furnishings and personal effects. In addition, I leave to her 70% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts, estimated at the time of signing at approximately $23 million. $23 million. My ears rang. I had known Walter did well with his consulting business, that he invested wisely, but he'd always talked about modest savings and comfortable retirement. $23 million was not modest. Harold continued, "To my son, Daniel Carver, I leave the remaining $10 million to be held in trust, with distributions beginning on his 45th birthday contingent upon his respectful and supportive treatment of his mother following my death." I gripped the arms of the chair. "Contingent upon his treatment of me." Harold nodded. "Walter was worried, Linda. He didn't say everything, but he hinted. He'd seen how Daniel and Kelsey talked down to you sometimes. He wanted to protect you from their ambition and their impatience." He flipped to the next page and tapped a paragraph with his pen. "Here. If, in the opinion of my attorney and a court of competent jurisdiction, Daniel fails to treat his mother with dignity and care after my passing, the entire $10 million in his trust shall immediately revert to Linda." He looked up at me. "In plain language, by throwing you out of your own home and abandoning you in a motel, your son just forfeited his $10 million. Linda, you don't inherit $23 million, you inherit $33 million. Plus the house, plus all personal property." I sat very still. The motel room. Kelsey's fake sympathy. Daniel's cold voice telling me I was useless now. They had tried to steal everything from me, and in doing so, they'd handed me more than they even knew existed. How? My voice shook. How could they show me a will that said something completely different? "Fraud," Harold said bluntly. "Document forgery, elder abuse. They likely had access to an older draft and altered it, or created a fake from scratch. Either way, it's illegal, and very serious." I swallowed. "What do we do now?" Harold's jaw tightened in a way I'd never seen before. "Now," he said, leafing through the folder with new resolve. "Now we make some calls. We freeze every account your son thinks he owns. We notify the bank, the police, and a very good detective I know. Then, Linda, we let Daniel and Kelsey discover what happens when you try to rob someone who finally has the law on her side." He smiled, and for the first time since Walter died, someone looked at me, not with pity, but with respect. "Let's call this Operation Payback," he said. "Or, if you prefer something gentler, Operation Justice." I wasn't feeling gentle. "Justice sounds just fine," I said. Within 2 hours, Harold's office looked like a command center. He called the banks first, faxing over the will and the trust documents. He identified himself as executor, ordered immediate account holds, pending investigation of fraud. Next came the police. A detective named Maria Rodriguez came to the office, sharp-eyed and calm. She reviewed the fake will Daniel had shown me on my phone, the blurry photo I'd snapped while Kelsey wasn't looking, and compared it to Walter's real will. "These aren't amateur forgeries," she said, flipping the pages under a magnifying glass. "Clean signatures, correct formatting. Someone knew what they were doing." "Could Kelsey have arranged that?" I asked softly. "She works with contracts all day, and Daniel manages investment portfolios. They know people." Almost certainly, Detective Rodriguez said, but we'll let evidence confirm it. In the meantime, I'm freezing any assets they tried to move, and I'm flagging this as elder financial abuse. That carries teeth. By mid-afternoon, every account Daniel thought he controlled refused his card. Utility transfers were halted. The new savings account Kelsey had tried to open under her name bounced. At 3:42 p.m., my phone rang. Daniel's name lit up the screen. "Mom, where are you?" he snapped the second I answered. "The bank says there's some kind of hold on Dad's accounts. They're telling me I don't have authorization. What did you do?" I took a slow breath. "I'm at Harold Green's office," I said. "You remember him? Dad's attorney, the one who read the real will." Silence. Then cautiously, "What real will?" "The one that leaves me the house and 70% of everything," I said, "and leaves you $10 million. As long as you treat me with dignity, which you have spectacularly failed to do." "Mom, you're confused," Daniel said, shifting to his soothing client voice. "Kelsey and I have been handling complicated things so you don't have to. You don't understand." "How—" "Daniel," I cut in, "Detective Rodriguez is sitting right here. Would you like to explain your forged documents to her directly?" There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Mom," he said slowly, "you don't want to do this. You'll ruin everything. Think of the kids. Think of—" "I am thinking of them," I said. "And they deserve to know what happens when their parents steal from family. Daniel, your father was smarter than you gave him credit for. He built protections into his will because he was afraid you'd let greed eat your love. You just proved him right." "You're overreacting," he snapped. Kelsey said, "Oh, good," I said. "Put her on speaker." There was rustling. Then Kelsey's cool voice joined us. "Linda," she said, sugar over steel, "I don't know what that small-town lawyer has told you, but—" "I know the truth," I said. "The accounts are frozen. Your forged paperwork is in police hands, and your supposed inheritance? It was never yours, not a penny. Your $10 million is gone, Kelsey, along with Daniel's clean record." Detective Rodriguez leaned closer, speaking loudly enough to be heard. "This is Detective Rodriguez with the Financial Crimes Unit. Miss Carver, Mr. Carver, I strongly suggest you both stop talking and consult an attorney. You'll be contacted about charges shortly." The line went very quiet. Then clicked, dead. Harold exhaled slowly. "Well," he said, "that went about as expected." I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking. "Harold," I said, "I want my house back." He smiled. "Let's go get your keys." That night, I slept in my own bed for the first time since Walter died. Kelsey had already begun colonizing the bedroom, her skincare bottles lined up on my nightstand, her dresses crowding the closet. I packed everything she owned into trash bags and left them neatly on the front porch. She could pick them up after her arraignment. The house looked different, not because the furniture had changed, but because the story had. For decades, I'd treated it like Walter's house, his leather chair, his den, his landscaping plans. I decorated around his preferences, arranged my life to fit his routines. Walking through those rooms that night, I saw something else. I was still here. He wasn't. The next morning, Harold called with more updates. "Daniel and Kelsey were arrested at a restaurant last night," he said. "Apparently, they were out celebrating their new financial freedom. The detective said they did not take the news of the handcuffs well." I let myself smile, just a little. "What happens now?" "Fraud, forgery, elder abuse," Harold said. "It won't be a quick process, but the evidence is on our side. In the meantime, all assets are in your control. 42 years of your life, Linda. You finally get to decide what that's worth." An hour later, Channel 5 News called. "Mrs. Carver," a reporter named Janet Miller said, "we've learned about a major elder fraud case involving your son and daughter-in-law. Would you consider sharing your story? It could help other seniors recognize warning signs." I stood in Walter's, no, my kitchen, looking out at the yard I'd mowed for years. "Maybe," I said, "but not yet. because another problem had just walked up my front steps. 3 days after Daniel's arrest, Kelsey's mother showed up at my door. Her name was Elaine Hayes, and she looked exactly how you'd picture the mother of a high-end financial advisor. Perfectly styled hair, diamonds at her ears and wrist, coat that cost more than my first car. "Linda," she said, stepping past me without waiting to be invited in. "We need to talk like civilized adults." I let her sit on my sofa, curious. "Your son is in jail," she began, crossing her legs. "Your daughter-in-law is in jail. This drama isn't good for anyone, especially not for my grandchildren." She said, "my grandchildren," like I hadn't changed their diapers and rocked them through fevers. "I'm not the one who forged legal documents and abandoned family," I said quietly. Elaine waved a manicured hand. "Mistakes were made, but dragging this through criminal court, that's excessive. We're prepared to make things right." She opened her handbag and pulled out a folder. "Our family is willing to compensate you for your inconvenience." She paused, smiled like a woman closing a sale. $2 million, tax-free, in exchange for dropping all criminal charges and signing a statement that this was a misunderstanding. $2 million. For $33 million, my home, my dignity, and their crimes erased. "No," I said. Elaine's smile cooled. "5," she said. "We can stretch to $5 million. That's more money than most people see in a lifetime, Linda. You live modestly. You'd be comfortable until the day you die. And my son and daughter can rebuild their lives. Everybody wins." "Everybody?" I asked. "Or just the people who thought I'd be too stupid and too scared to fight?" Her eyes hardened. "You should be careful," she said. "You think Walter's money was clean? Men like him don't build that kind of wealth without shortcuts. If this goes to trial, defense attorneys will dig into everything. You might not like what they find." There it was, the threat. When she left, perfume hanging in the hallway like smoke, I called Harold. "She's bluffing," he said. "Probably." "Probably isn't good enough," I replied. "If there's something ugly hiding in Walter's business, I want to see it first. I won't let them weaponize secrets I haven't even read." "You're sure?" he asked. "Some doors don't close once you open them." "I've already watched my son try to throw me out of my life," I said. "I'm done being afraid of paper." That's how I ended up in Walter's home office. My office now, with boxes of files spread around me and a private investigator named Carla Vega taking pictures of everything. Carla specialized in financial crimes. Short hair, sharp eyes, no nonsense. "Your husband was organized," she said, flipping through binders labeled by year and client. "This will help." It helped too much. By the end of the day, Carla had a whiteboard full of lines connecting shell companies, consulting contracts, and wire transfers into offshore accounts. "Linda," she said finally, "I'm going to tell you something you're not going to want to hear." "Say it," I whispered. "Walter's firm was washing money," she said gently, "for very bad people. This wasn't one mistake or a shady client. This was a system. A decade or more of laundering millions through consulting fees and fake invoices." I stared at the numbers, the investments, the accounts, my inheritance. "Likely proceeds of crime," Carla said. "If the FBI looks into this and decides Walter was part of a criminal enterprise, they could seize everything as tainted assets." "And the $10 million he left Daniel?" She flipped to another spreadsheet. "That portion came through particularly dirty channels," she said. "Payments that line up with known criminal incidents. If the government digs into this, they're going to look closely at that trust." I felt like I'd swallowed ice. So either I keep quiet, take my money, and pray no one notices, or I come forward and risk losing it all. "Those are the basic options," Carla said. "Unless someone else gets to the FBI first and offers them a more generous story." As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mom," Daniel's voice said when I answered. "We need to meet." That evening, Daniel called again, this time with Kelsey on speaker. We've talked to a federal attorney, Kelsey said smoothly. There's a way out of this for everyone. For everyone? I asked. Kevin, our lawyer, already spoke with the FBI, she said. They're interested in Walter's operation. Daniel can provide information, account histories, client names. In exchange, we're negotiating immunity. For all of us. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. What does all of us mean? It means the government takes the dirty money, she said. They let you keep the house and $5 million in clean assets. You sign some papers, acknowledge you had no idea what Walter was doing, and we all move on with our lives. No one goes to prison. You get security. We get a second chance. And if I say no? Silence. Then Daniel's voice, tight and angry. Mom, be realistic. If you go to them on your own, you'll lose everything. You could even face charges for benefiting from criminal money. You're old. You can't fight the federal government. Take the deal. Keep your house. Live comfortably. Let us handle the rest. I looked around the office at Walter's neat handwriting, the tidy stacks of lies. I need time, I said. You don't have time, Kelsey snapped. The meeting is tomorrow morning. Kevin needs to know you're on board. Then he'll have to be disappointed, I said, hanging up. I sat in the silence for a long time. Then I picked up the phone again. Carla, I said when she answered, how quickly can you get me in front of the FBI on my own terms? The next morning, I sat in a conference room at the federal building across town. A woman in a navy blazer introduced herself as Special Agent Sarah Martinez. Mrs. Carver, she said, do you understand that by talking to us, you may be admitting to benefiting from illegal funds? I understand, I said, but I'd rather tell you the truth than let my son and his wife sell you a story that makes them look like heroes and me look like an idiot. I told them everything. Walter's files, Carla's findings, Daniel's fraud, Kelsey's blackmail plan dressed up as a deal. Agent Martinez listened, expression unreadable. Your son believes he can trade information about your husband's crimes for a clean slate, she said. Yes, I replied. And he thinks I'll go along because I'm afraid of losing my comfort. Are you afraid? She asked. Less than I was last week, I said. Anger takes up a lot of room fear used to live in. For the first time, she smiled. Mrs. Carver, would you be willing to wear a wire to a meeting with your son and daughter-in-law? 3 hours later, there was a thin recording device taped under my blouse, and I was straightening cushions in my living room, waiting for the knock on my own front door. They arrived exactly at 8 in the evening, dressed like they were attending a business dinner instead of a last-chance negotiation. Daniel in a navy suit, Kelsey in a cream blouse and pencil skirt, carrying a leather portfolio. Mom, Daniel said, kissing my cheek like nothing had happened. You look good. I feel clearer than I have in a long time, I said, leading them to the dining table. Let's talk. Kelsey opened the portfolio, laying out typed pages. This is the proposal, she said. You retain this house and $5 million in assets that the FBI has agreed are clean. The remaining funds go to the government. In exchange, you acknowledge you were unaware of any wrongdoing, and you agree not to pursue further charges against Daniel or me. Her voice was calm, confident, rehearsed. And you two? I asked. What do you get? Immunity, Daniel said. We cooperate. We give them everything on Walter's clients. We walk away free. Mom, this is the best possible outcome. You get to stay in your home, you have more money than you'll ever need, and the past stays, buried. I tilted my head. Tell me something, I said. When did you first realize Walter was laundering money? Before you tried to steal my inheritance, or after? Kelsey's eyes flicked to Daniel. That's not relevant, she said. It's very relevant, I replied. Because if you knew and stayed quiet, that makes you an accessory. And if you found out only when you started digging to forge documents, well, that makes you greedy and unlucky. Mom, please stop using words you don't understand, Daniel snapped. This isn't a movie. This is real life. You're not some avenging hero. You're a widow who got caught in something bigger than her. Let the people who understand finance handle it. That was when I knew I'd done the right thing. He still thought I was small. Funny you should mention movies, I said lightly. Agent Martinez at the FBI thought this might make a good one too. She's especially interested in the part where you two tried to blackmail me with my dead husband's crimes. The color drained from Kelsey's face. Agent who? Daniel whispered. The front door opened. 2 agents stepped in, followed by Sarah Martinez herself. Daniel Carver, Kelsey Carver, she said, voice cool and formal. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder financial abuse, and attempted extortion of a federal witness. Witness? Daniel croaked. Your mother, Agent Martinez said. She came to us before you could. That tends to make a very big difference. Kelsey stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. You have no idea what you're doing, she hissed at me. You're ruining your own life. Walter worked with dangerous people. They won't just let this go because you've decided to play hero. You're putting yourself in danger. Agent Martinez turned toward her, eyes sharp. Mrs. Carver, are you threatening a federal witness? I'm warning her, Kelsey snapped. Good to know, the agent said. Add witness intimidation to the list. I watched from my chair as they were handcuffed in my living room, protesting, bargaining, swearing none of this would stick. When the door finally closed behind them, the house felt peaceful, quiet in a way that wasn't empty. Agent Martinez sat back down across from me. You did well, she said. Most people in your position would have taken the deal. I've taken whatever my family offered for 40+ years, I said. Look where that got me. She nodded slowly. I also promised you some answers about Walter, she said. Now that your son and daughter-in-law are in custody, I can give you the rest of the story. Your husband, she said, opening a thick folder, was laundering money. That much is true. But he wasn't just working for criminals. He was working for us. For you? The FBI, she clarified. For 12 years, he was a confidential informant embedded in a money laundering network. The funds that flowed through his accounts were monitored. He kept a percentage as payment and to maintain his cover. The rest went toward building cases against several crime families. My mind spun. So the money he left me is legal, she said. Every cent. The Department of Justice signed off on his compensation. Your inheritance is clean. Untouchable from a forfeiture standpoint because it was earned through authorized cooperation. I swallowed hard. And the people he was helping you catch? 47 arrests so far, she said. Over $200 million in criminal assets seized. Your husband's work did a lot of damage to some very dangerous organizations. That's why he kept it from you, for your safety. I thought about Walter sitting at this very desk, writing checks and answering calls, never once letting me see how heavy the load really was. Why didn't anyone tell me? I whispered. Because the investigation was ongoing, she said, and because, to be blunt, we weren't sure whose side your son and daughter-in-law were on. We were watching. Your situation with the will gave us answers we needed. She closed the folder. Here's the bottom line, Linda. The $33 million is yours. The house is yours. Daniel and Kelsey will face serious federal charges for what they did to you. As for the people Walter helped us investigate, they're going to be very busy dealing with their own problems for a long time. We'll have a protection plan in place if we think you're in danger. But right now, you are, for the first time in a long time, safe and fully in control of your life. Safe. In control. 2 words I hadn't felt in years. For what it's worth, she added, I see a lot of victims in my work. You don't look like one of them. I smiled, slow and real. I did, I said, right up until my son told me I was useless. 6 months later, I stood in my remodeled kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 cups instead of 1. The house looked nothing like the temple Walter had built around his habits. The heavy drapes were gone, replaced with light curtains that let the morning spill in. His old den, the one he never let me touch, was now a bright studio with paint splatters on the floor and canvases leaning against the walls. "Good morning, Linda," said Dr. May Chen as she walked in, a leather folder tucked under her arm. She was my new financial advisor, recommended by Agent Martinez, a woman whose loyalty was to me, not to my son. "Morning," I said, handing her a mug. "Ready to tell me how my fortune's behaving?" "Very well," she said. "The foundation is fully funded, the scholarships are underway, and your investments are boring in all the best ways." We sat at my new breakfast table, one I had chosen for once, and reviewed the quarterly report for the Carver Foundation for Elder Justice. $15 million of my inheritance now paid for lawyers to represent seniors like me, women and men whose children treated them like ATMs and obstacles. There was a documentary in production too. Some streaming service wanted to dramatize my story as The Mother Who Fought Back. I told them they could keep the title if the profits went to elder abuse prevention programs. Daniel and Kelsey were each serving 18-month federal sentences, shorter than I'd like, longer than they wanted. Their names appeared in the news every time someone talked about family fraud. Kelsey had written me letters from prison, 17 of them. The first few were excuses, then came apologies, then came pleas. I stopped opening them after number 5. "Another one?" Dr. Chen asked, nodding toward the unopened envelope on the counter. I said. "Her lawyer says she wants forgiveness, a relationship, another chance." "Do you?" she asked gently. I thought about the motel room, the $200, the look on Daniel's face when he told me I wasn't useful anymore. "Some things you can forgive without going back to them," I said. "I hope she finds God or therapy or something that makes her better. But she doesn't get access to me as proof she's changed." We finished our meeting. After she left, I wandered through my house, the one I'd fought for and finally claimed. In the studio, a canvas waited on the easel, a self-portrait I'd been working on, not of the woman hunched over a suitcase in a motel, of the woman sitting upright, eyes forward, shoulders back, a woman who had finally learned she was not a burden, but the main character in her own life. My phone buzzed on the table, a notification from the foundation's email, another story from another woman in her 70s writing, "My son says I'm confused and wants me to sign some papers. I don't know what to do." I sat down to answer her, because that's the thing about what happened to me. The money matters, the house matters, but what matters most is this. I stopped believing the lie that getting older meant I had to hand over my power to whoever reached for it first. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and if any part of my story feels a little too familiar. Because truth doesn't disappear just because someone tries to bury it under signatures and sweet-sounding lies. It waits. And sometimes all it needs is one woman who finally decides she's done being quiet.